I've been watching your documentaries for a while.
Oh,
I
thank you.
Teenager was fucking amazing. I mean, I know it was that many years ago now, but I love that film.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
And you make such great work. And I saw this email and I was so excited. I think I emailed Adam back right away. I'm like, I went to college with Matt. I really would love to talk to him.
That's so sweet. No, it's so fun to reconnect on Zoom
I know.
from 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 your throne.
In my throne, my castle. um, but I want to talk about this film, which was great and really interesting because I've seen her books for years.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with her name, but not really this at all. Um,
hmm hmm
what made you so? And it's through PBS, right? That the
Well, I made it independently, and then PBS and the New York Times OpDoc series released it about a week ago.
what drew you to the story, and why do you feel like now's the right time for people to know about it?
Well, it was mid-pandemic lockdown when I made the film, and I wanted to do something that kind of reflected on what we were going through, but not in a direct and explicit way. And so I read my friend Olivia Lang's manuscript, and she had a short section on Louise Hay, and I was very intrigued by that. I've made a couple of films that look at the AIDS epidemic or artists who have died prematurely from AIDS. And so um, I just started to poke around and I found some really compelling archival footage and bought all the VHS tapes I could find of Louise Hay on eBay and Etsy. And then after digitizing those, continued to kind of sleuth around and found the narrator of our film, David Alt, who was part of this new age boy band called Alliance. And when all that came together, I kind of recognized that there was a bigger story to be told that resonated with this current moment as well.
Alliance, that was amazing. I mean, just that one bit is amazing, I think, in itself, and I love. But yeah, it's so interesting because you think about what's going on now and what was going on then with specifically with the AIDS pandemic, and it's a lot of like people just feeling lost and looking for something. I just thought it so fascinating. I had like no idea about this at all with her, and I just you see her books for years and years. Like my friend Heather,
Mm-hmm.
who I think like any like metaphysical book ever has it. And I remember like the giant Louise Hay's like encyclopedia or like it's like that really big volume and how
Yeah,
every
yeah.
problem you have like relates back to like issues in your life. Um, it's did you learn something about yourself in researching this film?
What do you mean?
I don't know. Did you it's just, with her did you find anything surprising, I guess, with
Yeah,
it?
I mean, I found it to be disarming, some of the things she was saying. That definitely could be perceived as anti-scientific, particularly in this moment where we were
Yeah.
confronting so many people who were skeptical or denying just kind of basic measures to prevent the spread of COVID. But I also saw the nuance and layers there in that Louise was somebody who had her own experience with childhood sexual abuse and trauma, and that she came to this community with a sense of a kind of enhanced sense of empathy because of her own trauma. And so I saw that she was not necessarily curing people of AIDS, in fact, definitely not, but
Yeah.
definitely providing a cure for shame, one might say, and that experience was healing. I think that the narrator David Alt puts it very succinctly. There's a difference between healing and curing, and I think that difference is blurry in terms of Louise Hay's work and the perception of it, and it for me sparked a lot of skepticism, but that I saw through all the men I spoke to who were alive and were part of the Hayrides, a pretty um, kind of transformative effect that their work with her had, and I came to follow their lead and their experience rather than coming to it with a sense of cynicism or skepticism.
I love that you said that because there is obviously, yeah, you're not, gonna cure AIDS through loving yourself. And but there was that whole sense of, I think in the beginning they're talking about it too, like you used to going to church, and it's such a like a shameful thing, and this was a completely transformative, different experience for these men because of that, and a different
Hmm.
approach to going to church. I think it was in the the beginning of the film. Was it David was talking where he's talking about somebody invited him to go out on a, I forget what night it was, and it was completely different than what he expected. Um,
Yeah.
and it's so it's kind of a it's so I love that because I don't know, it's just kind of very fascinating. But
Yeah, I think a lot of gay people and many people would identify with this idea of creating your own family. And the level of kind of homophobic familial rejection during the height of the AIDS crisis was just so extraordinary that I found a Los Angeles Times poll that said that the majority of Americans supported quarantining people with AIDS, and that a significant amount of people even favored tattooing them. And so many gay men who were contending with AIDS were completely rejected by their families. So I think this sense of creating your own, but also the comfort in gravitating around a maternal figure, which I think Louise definitely was, this kind of second mother to people. But at the same time, there was a kind of cult of personality around her. She was very charismatic, and people gravitated towards that. So as much as they were finding mutual support in these environments, it very much revolved around this personality who took on a kind of maternal role in their lives.
absolutely, absolutely, I love too because it does, in creating this documentary, it does kind of become this like archival. I think it why these films are so important because it does become such a placeholder and important in just history, in our history, and perhaps a lot of people kind of forget what the gay community not now is only going through, but back then, like you said, I had no idea about that poll, but like the tattooing and shit like that, which is insane. But it's also so, I mean, these are the things that it's our responsibility to remember, and it's our responsibility to share with people. So, lest we ever repeat these.
Yeah, I know we're the same age because we went to college together. But I know for us, we were really saturated with AIDS educations about safe sex, et cetera. And I made another film called Recorder about a woman who recorded television 24 hours a day for 30 years. And the amount of AIDS public service announcements was really astonishing. It really was a conversation point in our youths. We remember Magic Johnson coming out as HIV positive, or Greg Louganis hitting his head on the diving board during the Olympics and having to disclose that he was HIV positive. But I think for a newer generation, that's not the case. And the scope of devastation and death and fear surrounding the AIDS epidemic is not something that they know. So, both as a gay person who feels a sense of debt and of urgency to preserve the memory of those who died of AIDS, I think in general, we have to remember that, you know, pandemics like this and all the lives lost is a kind of erasure of history, and that there are people who would be amongst us who are hidden in plain sight, whose lives were cut short. And so, as a filmmaker, I'm really interested in preserving those stories. And in this moment of a pandemic, looking at another moment in which people faced tremendous fear and confusion about the nature of a disease that was transforming their lives. I think there's a lot of differences between AIDS and COVID-19, obviously, but that there are some parallels that are meaningful to look at.
I agree with that absolutely, and I think that, I mean, I think it is just the perfect timing for this film. And I like what you said about yourself as a filmmaker, because I find in all of your films, and the one that came out most recently, which I haven't seen, which I'm dying to see, about the bio dome.
Hmm.
I think you
Biosphere too, yeah.
biospheres, yes, which I've seen the trailer and it looks amazing, and I have to see it. But I love that you kind of find, I feel like these stories that could easily be forgotten that are so important, not only for what they were, but kind of how they parallel certain things in life. And I love that you do that as a filmmaker, because there's just so many important things that people should know about.
Yeah. I'm really drawn towards the hidden histories, or the things that kind of have faded from collective memory, and trying to reappraise those in their full complexity. So, you know, I think the Hayrides are a forgotten chapter of the early AIDS epidemic. Some people who were in the midst of it do remember that, and they do recall the controversy surrounding her and the popularity of Louise. But for those of us who weren't there, there may be a faint memory of Louise from her cassette tapes or posters or books that appear on the shelves of those who are drawn towards the metaphysical or self-help. But you know, very few people, I think, understand or know, because I didn't, that the genesis of the New Age movement and the trends towards self-help, you know, through the power of positive thinking, it has its origins during the AIDS epidemic, and I didn't know that, and I found that to be really interesting.
I really had no idea either, and I think it is so interesting, and it's kind of going into things I think this year too, and people's kind of inclination too. I think when self-help, certain things can be empowering, but I also, you know, some things can be very dangerous. um,
Hmm.
um, and just that parallel in itself of what's going on now, I think it is so important and something that we should definitely be also looking at, and kind of maybe everybody watching themselves. Love is great. Love is great. Everyone should love, but you know, there's also you want to
Yeah,
have.
I think the idea of self-love can be very navel-gazing. I think so much of what we're um, dealing with now is that there are consequences for our choices that affect people who have increased vulnerability. That it's not just about self-preservation, it's about looking out for other people around us who have more precarity in their lives. And that is totally contrary to how most American people and most people around the world think. Um, and so this idea of loving oneself is the remedy towards all of the kind of illness and tragedy that we face is problematic in a sense. It could be narcissistic and navel gazing, but also I do think that in the context of the AIDS epidemic, we were talking about a group of people who were intensely stigmatized and who faced an almost certain death sentence. And that is a distinct difference from COVID-19, is nearly everybody with the disease was facing death. And I think this idea of loving oneself was a meaningful antidote to a shared sense of trauma.
I love how you put that. I think that was beautifully put, and I'm just so excited about this film. Um, at the end of everything, what do you hope that people are taking from it?
I think my goal as a filmmaker more and more is to get people to be able to hold two things at once. I mean, sometimes I think people want a film to reinforce the point of view of a filmmaker and to tell you and to guide you what to think. And I'm very much into guiding people to think about multiple things at once, to have an ambivalent or complicated relationship to a subject, and to not necessarily know how they feel. And I think that's challenging to people, and that it's kind of how we should look at everybody is things aren't so black and white. It's people can be both incredibly helpful and they can also be harmful. People can be benevolent and they can be selfish. And I want people to think about Louise Hay in those terms, and to really reflect on um, the cults of personality, but also the sources of comfort that we have in this moment of extreme grief.
I love that. I just love everything you say. I think you speak so eloquently, and it's so true. But God, I've enjoyed this so much, Matt, and it's so nice to see
Thank you.
you.
It's so great to see you after all these
I
16 years.
know. I know. You know, everything's cool. Everything's cool. I really enjoyed this film so much, and really all your work has been so amazing. And I just think you're so talented. I mean, you're a talented
Thank
back
you.
at all of these,
Thanks so much.
and it's so lovely to see you doing your thing. And I've loved everything that I've seen that you've done. Truly, really, really, really have.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Well, nice to talk to you.
Yeah, great to talk to you too.
Too.
hang in there
You
in Los
too.
Angeles. I hope we cross paths in real
I
life
do
sooner
too.
than later.
Oh my God, I absolutely do. In the future, if you're ever in LA, please tell me. And
I'll
I,
hit you up. Yeah, it would be cool to catch up.
yes, so good to see you, Matt.